Okay, team, I have 10:01. Where are we at?
It's open and all the attendees are signing in.
Okay, so Sine, are you ready for us to start, or give it another minute?
We're good to go. We can go ahead and start.
Okay, great. All right, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our School Energy Efficiency Stimulus Program workshop. We are delighted to have you all here today. My name is Janaea Scott, and I'm the Vice Chair of the California Energy Commission. And Commissioner Karen Douglas and myself have been working closely with the team to get all of the information for today's workshop developed. I did want to let folks know as we get started that I am not seeking reappointment at the Energy Commission, and next week is going to be my last week at the Commission. So I'm really excited to have gotten this program started, the first opening foray, but bummed that I'm not going to get to see it come across the finish line. But I want to let you know that the leadership for this will remain under Commissioner Douglas, and Commissioner McAllister, with his very able hands, will step in to take over. So the two of them are who you will see on this School Energy Efficiency Stimulus Program after today. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to attend, and just a few opening remarks, which is that this, as you all know, is a very important program for the Energy Commission and for the state of California and the schools, as we strive to achieve a clean and equitable future for all Californians. Improving energy efficiency in our existing buildings is an extremely important part of achieving California's clean energy and climate goals. And additionally, a majority of the program funding will go to school ventilation, which is important not just for COVID, but also for other air quality concerns like air pollution and wildfire smoke. Better air quality means a better learning environment for our children. The staff has been working hard to launch a program by the aggressive deadline set by the legislature, and the proposal that you'll see today seeks to implement statutory priorities by initially focusing on projects in underserved communities, with plans to expand the program based on funding availability and our experiences with the initial round of funding. In designing and implementing the program, we are hoping to build on and learn from our experience in carrying out other energy programs for schools, including Prop 39 and our school bus program. So we very much look forward to your input on staff's proposal and your continued engagement as this program evolves. We're especially interested in hearing about any challenges that the applicants anticipate they might face in assessing our program, and solutions that you might have for us, suggestions to put in place. And also really looking forward to hearing some input from contractors and other stakeholders on the proposed application documentation and the project reporting requirements. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to my fellow Commissioner, Karen Douglas, to welcome you and make some opening remarks for our workshop. Thank you again for your participation, and let me turn it to Commissioner Karen Douglas.
Well, super. Thank you so much, Vice Chair Scott. And you know, your ears will be burning for a while, and we'll have an opportunity to further embarrass you at the business meeting. But I just want to thank you for your tremendous contributions to the Energy Commission on so many things, including your leadership on this program, as we've worked really hard and fast to get this up and off the ground. And it's been especially fun working with you over the holidays and over the last few weeks to help us with our staff get to this point of having this workshop. As I've said, I'm Commissioner Karen Douglas. I serve as the lead commissioner with the Renewables Division, and some number of different programs here at the Energy Commission. I'm really excited to continue this work on AB 841. It's timely, it's important, and it's got the potential to make a huge contribution to both electricity savings, of course, but also quality of life differences for students and school site personnel across the state, and particularly in underserved communities. I'm excited to hear feedback and comment on the Energy Commission's initial plans for administering this program as proposed in the draft guidelines that we'll be discussing during today's workshop. As I think everyone is aware, AB 841 gave the Energy Commission very aggressive deadlines to meet in making initial funding awards, and the draft guidelines that are before all of us today reflect the Energy Commission's commitment to work purposefully but swiftly to prioritize schools and underserved communities. And of course, we're committed to continuing to update and improve on the guidelines as appropriate. We'll be pleased to be joined by CPUC Commissioner Shiroma for parts of our workshop today. And I want to say that we very much appreciate the collaboration and the great working relationship that we've had with the CPUC as we work together to move this program forward. So with that, I'm looking forward to today's discussion. I want to encourage the public to submit post-workshop comments as soon as possible. We love to get comments. We love to have them detailed. We're going to be looking for specifics. If you see something in the guidelines that you think should be better, if you give us your ideas, give us your line items, help us make this work and make this work efficiently. We hope to be able to present the guidelines, with any appropriate edits or changes for commission approval by April in order to be able to make initial awards by May 1st. So that concludes my comments. And again, welcome everybody to this workshop.
Great, and thank you very much, Commissioners.
Right, and we don't have Commissioner Shiroma quite yet, right?
Right, I think she's joining us a little later.
Okay, excellent. Looking forward to having her join us.
All right, thank you very much, Commissioners. As Vice Chair Scott mentioned, Commissioner Genevieve Shiroma will be joining us a little bit later, and once she does, we'll be taking a break in the presentation to allow her to make some more remarks as well. So thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Ryan Castigar, and I'm a program analyst for the CEC. Today's workshop is being conducted remotely via Zoom, and the broadcast is being recorded as well. Audience members are encouraged to participate both during the designated discussion breaks and during the public comment period at the end of the presentation. Zoom offers three ways to comment. First, you may use the raise hand feature, and a panelist will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. If you are joining via telephone, you may dial *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute your phone line. If you do not have a telephone or microphone connection, you can type in your question in Zoom's Q&A window. General questions about the workshop broadcast or technical issues can be submitted using Zoom's chat feature. Please do not exceed the allotted 3 minutes per comment when making your remarks. Additionally, you may submit written comments no later than February 5th using the CEC e-commenting system at the Energy Commission website. First, we will be briefly discussing the legislative background of SEAS today, along with an overview of the Survivor program. Today, we'll be discussing areas of the draft guidelines and facilitating a robust discussion of eligibility requirements, program funding sources, staff's proposal on a phased approach, application tiers, the application process and reporting for program requirements. Staff will be as brief as possible to allow as much time for public comment, to elicit comments from stakeholders and LEAs and other interested parties. In addition to the discussion breaks, we will conclude with a public comment period where attendees may provide additional feedback and ask questions. Now for a little background on AB 841. AB 841 was signed into law in September 2020, and the bill directed the Energy Commission to form and administer the SEAS program. SEAS consists of two programs: the School Reopening Ventilation and Energy Efficiency Verification and Repair Program, or SURVEVOR for short, and the School Non-Compliant Plumbing Fixture and Appliance Program, or SNAPFA. These programs will provide invaluable assistance to schools that are in the process of reopening during an unprecedented global pandemic. SNAPFA will be covered during session 2 today, which begins at 2 p.m. This brings us to our first topic of the day, which is a general program overview. This initial rollout of the SURVEVOR program will provide grants to assess, maintain, adjust, or repair HVAC systems in California schools. SURVEVOR grants will include continuous CO2 monitoring to ensure that proper ventilation levels are maintained in classrooms. The CEC will award a grant if the amount requested in the application package is verified by a contractor estimate, and if the application meets all program requirements outlined in the CE's SURVEVOR draft guidelines. In addition, SURVEVOR will have the added benefit of creating new jobs and stimulating local economies in disadvantaged communities across the state. Here's some key program dates and deadlines. AB 841 requires California's large investor-owned utilities to file a joint advice letter outlining CE's program funding with the California Public Utilities Commission by February 1st of this year, with the PUC approving the advice letter by March 1st. This advice letter, among other technical requirements, will finalize the budget and available funding for the CE's programs. The CEC will begin accepting SURVEVOR grant applications and will issue a notice of funding under SNAPFA to California LEAs on April 1st. We aim to adopt program guidelines and begin approving grant applications before May of 2021. The CE's program will conclude on December 1st, 2026, and all unspent program funds will be returned to their respective utilities on the state. As you can see in this slide, since the legislation was signed into law this past September, both the ventilation and plumbing programs are subject to very aggressive schedules. Accordingly, staff has worked very hard to get these programs up and running and functioning to meet these deadlines. Both these programs will be funded by the California IOU's rolling portfolio funds. The estimated initial annual budget is expected to be approximately $275 million, and 75% of the total funds will go towards SURVEVOR projects. Since funds come from IOU energy efficiency budgets, awards must be spent proportionally within the service territories of the IOUs that originally contributed the funds. The estimated SURVEVOR's 2021 budget is expected to be $200 million. For the total program, we estimate that the total program budget may be $750 million. It is important to note that IOUs will disperse funds to the CEC each round on a quarterly basis. We will discuss later how this disbursement timing will affect our proposal for program design. As we discussed on the previous slide, program funds must be spent proportionally within the service territories of the utilities from which the funds originally came from. Additionally, as defined in the statute, 25% of funds must go towards projects located in underserved communities. Staff is currently developing a GIS map tool to allow LEAs to identify qualifying service territories and to assess whether their schools are located in an underserved community. This brings us to our second topic of the day: eligible applicants and underserved community requirements. Staff is proposing a phased approach for the initial phase of program awards. Initial program awards will be limited to the project work listed here, along with an additional 20% of the requested amount reserved for repairs, replacements, or energy efficiency upgrades to make the system functional or more energy efficient. Staff currently proposes that the initial program awards be limited to LEAs with schools located in an underserved community as defined by the legislation. Furthermore, staff proposes that each LEA applying will be limited to one application per funding round. An application may include multiple school sites in that one application. However, each school site in the application must meet one of the underserved community criteria. The CEC acknowledges that these program guidelines may need to be revised, and we will continually evaluate these guidelines and provide new additions to update eligibility and prioritization as funding is available. SEAS program applications must come from California Local Education Agencies, or LEAs for short. California LEAs eligible for SEAS include school districts as defined in the Education Code, which includes county boards of education, county superintendents of schools, and direct instructional services provided by the state, as well as charter schools. The first round of Survivor Awards will be limited to schools located in an area that meets at least one of the 5 following criteria for designation as an underserved community. A community with a median household income less than 80% of the statewide average. A community that is within an area identified as among the most disadvantaged 25% in the state, according to the California Environmental Protection Agency, and based on the most recent California Communities Environmental Health Screening Tool, also known as Cal EnviroScreen. A community in which at least 75% of public school students in the project area are eligible to receive free or reduced price meals under the National School Lunch Program, and a community located on lands belonging to a federally recognized California Indian tribe. California LEAs may apply for grants on behalf of schools that the LEA either owns, leases from a school district, or has a lease for with a duration exceeding the projected useful life of Survivor project improvements. LEAs are required to provide proof of ownership or complying leases as part of the application process. Staff has proposed sorting applicants into application tiers, as you can see here. This approach is designed to equitably distribute grant funds across all LEAs in the state. Program staff adapted this tier approach from the successful Prop 39 and ECA Ed programs. Due to the diverse makeup of the state, LEAs based on enrollment numbers vary widely across the state. As mentioned previously, SEAS funding must be spent proportionally within the service territories of the utility that provided the funds. And due to this requirement, staff has developed a funding tier system based on LEA student enrollment, with the maximum funding level for each tier. Eligible schools will be placed in one of 16 categories based on enrollment number, tier, and utility territory. A certain percentage of funding will be made available to each tier in each utility service territory. Table 1 shows the student enrollment tier breakdown, and Table 2 shows the 16 possible school categories, along with available funding percentages. If an application tier has unspent funds remaining at the end of a round, the CEC will evaluate program participation, and these funds may be reallocated to other application tiers in the same utility service territory, or may be held over for a future funding round. So this brings us to our first discussion break. We're going to pause our staff presentation for anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on any of the topics we have presented so far, or any corresponding part of staff's proposal in the draft guidelines. We hope that these breaks allow for staff and commissioners to hear from the stakeholder community, and we've provided a few topics or leading questions that are areas staff would like feedback on. Staff is interested in any questions or reactions to the proposal of a phased approach, application tiers, and funding allocations. And we've also provided a reminder that you can use the raise hand feature if you wish to speak, or dial *9 to raise your hand if you're on the phone. As a final reminder, there will be public comment at the end of this session for all comments, so this is not your only opportunity to comment.
Right, so we have 4 raised hands right now. Michael Ensler, you will be allowed to talk. Please keep it to 3 minutes if possible.
Thank you. Will there be a higher preference given to LEAs that qualify in multiple categories, such as if they have the free or reduced lunch, which is high, and also in several other areas of the 5 or so?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. The way we read the statute is it's a binary. You qualify if you meet any of those conditions. So we have not proposed ranking them based on the number of those that are qualified for by each LEA or each school within that LEA.
So just one then would be fine. We're not striving to try to mark all the boxes then.
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Commissioner Shimura is on, so we can, we'll get back to the discussion break in just a second. And you can go ahead and speak, Commissioner.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm really pleased that I can join you today. Good morning, Commissioner Douglas, Vice Chair Scott, all the workshop participants. I'm the assigned commissioner at the California Public Utilities Commission for energy efficiency. So I'm pleased to attend on the CPUC's behalf. I'm looking forward to learning more about the Energy Commission's School Energy Efficiency Stimulus Program. I'm sure, as others have said, I just joined, so I'm sure others have said before I joined that this is a really important and essential program. Prepare schools throughout the state for the reopening as we navigate the pandemic and as we come out of the pandemic. I feel a great deal of optimism, a lot of challenges, but a great deal of optimism. I think, as you know, the statute authorized that the CPUC will direct the 4 investor-owned utilities to shift $600 million of their budgeted, not yet collected, but budgeted funds. And so we will be navigating the collection of those funds from the customers, but to assure that this program is funded and that it is a very effective program. We did act with a sense of urgency last week to vote out the decision to transfer the funds to the Energy Commission. And now the real work begins, rolling up the sleeves, planning and implementation of the program to ensure that school districts in underserved communities have functioning ventilation systems, new plumbing fixtures, appliances, all things that the Energy Commission will be outlining for the effective implementation of this program. So thank you. I look forward to the commentary at the workshop. And thank you for allowing me to attend with you today.
Commissioner Shiroma, I just wanted to turn on my camera. Commissioner Scott, Vice Chair Scott's here as well. And before you came on, there she is. Before you came on, we just mentioned the appreciation we have for the close work with the CPUC and close coordination and appreciate you being here today. So thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. We'll go back with the questions. We have 5 more raised hands. Diana Baca, you will be allowed to speak and unmute.
I apologize. I don't have a question. Sorry.
No problem. All right, Jennifer Butler, you will be allowed to speak.
Hi, thank you so much. My question is focused on the staff proposed approach and specifically about that all school sites must meet one of the underserved community criteria. And so if I understand that correctly, so the district-wide would have to be in the underserved, is that correct?
No, this is school site related. So we do understand that some LEAs are large enough that not all of their schools will qualify. And these applications are for those schools within those districts that qualify for one of those.
Wonderful. I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
All right, Jeff Morris, you will be allowed to speak.
Hi, Jeff Morris from the Trinity County Office of Education. We have a unique situation here. Only 3 of our 15 school sites are located within an IOU service area. And a large amount of the school sites within Trinity County are in disadvantaged communities. How is it or will or will the CEC and others reconcile the lack of funding to those school sites within the public utility district area of our community in terms of equity, or is that just something that's off the table?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and something we've discussed a lot. The way that we read the bill is it is specific to those IOUs, and it's also very specific to even within those IOUs, the funds collected have to be spent within those service territories. So if part of the funds come from San Diego Gas and Electric, they're not fungible to other areas. They have to be spent in that utilities service area. So we do not see an easy path to spending those funds outside of that utilities area with the very prescriptive language in the bill. But I will open it up if commissioners, anyone else has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I might have some follow-up questions regarding that. I think that there are going to be some equity challenges involved, or other solutions need to move forward.
No, thank you, Mr. Morris. If you could include that in any written comments, that will give us a chance to discuss and respond.
Appreciate the feedback.
All right. Jay Kim, you will be allowed to unmute.
Hi, I'm Jay Kim, Energy Manager for Colton Joint Unified School District. Yeah, my question was exactly the same about, we have several schools that are served by public utilities, so we'll also put that in a written comment and questions. My question specific here is, can we use some of the funds to pay for consulting services to prepare the application? It seems like there's several things, a very complicated set of information that's needed for the application. So just wondering if a school district spends money on consultants to prepare the application, can that be reimbursed if awarded?
That's a very good question. At this point, we're not looking at expanding to that, but that is a question we received that we are going to discuss further. Ultimately, we're trying to make sure as much of the funding goes to resolving the identified issues as possible. But if we, and we also, to that end, have been working very hard to make the application process as simple as possible to reduce any of those needs for those professionals. But if you can, when you're thinking about it in your written comments, try to delineate the barriers that you would need the consultants to help you with, and we can see if there are other solutions as well.
Great, thank you.
All right, so we have a lot of questions coming in the Q&A, mainly on eligibility and definitions of LEA, which will be, we have those defined in the statute. You can also read them in the draft guidelines and then the PowerPoints, which we posted after the workshop. Christopher, is there any Q&A questions that you want to go over specifically?
I'm looking and we have a number of them. I'm guessing, are some of these questions related to the ones we have up on the board, or I'm just seeing if there's some general groups that we can try to speak to.
One of them would be on the funding tier chart, which kind of goes into our discussion of large LEAs. So can you, one from Michelle would be, can you explain the percentage of funding tier chart? We fell into the 31.6%. Does that mean that 31.6% of the allocated dollar amount for appropriate utilities will be designated for schools with over 10,000 students?
Okay. That one I will ask Jonathan Fong, who is more familiar with the breakdown of that table, to raise that, to see if we can address that question. Otherwise, we'll follow up on that in the written comments.
Yes, thank you, Christopher. I think I caught most of the context of that question. So I think the question referred to, if they fell into the tier that was 31%. So what we're proposing is the overall budget for that particular, from that service territory, would be allocated by those percentages. So yes, I mean, for someone whose LEA, that district fell into that tier, they would be eligible for their grants applications to be funded by that percentage of the overall available funds from that particular IOU.
So we have one more Q&A question we'll go through since we have so many coming in. One is if large district submits an application that includes many schools for one funding round, can there be approval for partial funds for some of the schools if funding is limited? Or is it all or nothing for all the schools listed in the application?
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? I had an audio problem.
If large districts submit a application that includes many schools for one funding round, can there be approval of partial funds for some of the schools, or is it all or nothing?
That's something that we are discussing as far as, if the available funds for that round run out, do we have a partial funding? We have not come into a decision on that, but that is a good question.
I will say, I think that some of the amount of awards, budgets for awards will be covered in the next section to some degree. So questions on the budget and award amounts might be deferred until we complete the next presentation, but for eligible applicants and underserved communities, we can take a look at the questions relevant to that.
All right, let's grab one of the callers that we have. We have Michelle Slater. I will allow you to unmute yourself.
Hi there, this is Mitch Slater. I'm with FB2 Solutions. We're a consulting firm for the Central Valley. I have some deep concerns with, I was a previous director of maintenance operation with Lodi Unified, and they're served by Lodi Electric Utility. It's about a 45 to 55 split between PG&E. So you're saying that everything within the Lodi Electric Utility will not have a funding base. Is that correct?
Question, you're saying that they get their gas and electric from Lodi, or just their electric?
Just their electric.
Okay, so they're a gas customer of PG&E?
Yes, through Spur.
Okay. Yeah, so that's something that, we are looking at the eligibility of those being in the utility territory of the PG&E, so.
Okay, that answers that. So I had another question about disadvantage. There's some of these school districts that will not meet that requirement to have any schools within that because they're a more prosperous school district. Are you saying that unless they have one that's in the disadvantaged or under disadvantaged community, that therefore we would not be able to get any funds for a school district?
And as I said before, these are based on the school site. And so if that school, if you have, let's say 10 schools and 2 of your schools meet one of those criteria for underserved, those 2 schools would be available for this round. And then any additional schools, as eligibility is opened up later, when we reassess this with funds are available, then those additional schools that are outside the underserved community definition would be available. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can just apply for those schools within your LEA that qualify as underserved in this round.
So round 1 is only underserved schools, and if they're not in that category, don't bother to apply at this point.
Yeah, they would not meet the requirements for this initial rollout of the program.
And of course, one last question. I'm very concerned about the consultant fees. I've read through the documents. I don't think that our school community will easily put those together. It'll require professionals to come in. Are those funded or not?
And that's something that we are listening to people's questions and comments on that. and we will discuss that internally.
Okay, yeah, we appreciate some clarity. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. This is Natalie Lee. I'm Deputy Director for the Renewable Energy Division, the division implementing the program. And I just want to note we're so encouraged to see so much participation and so many great questions. But given our timing, we're going to have to propose that we post written responses to the questions submitted in the Q&A to allow us to get through our entire presentation. And if we have time at the end of the session, we can go back to the written questions and try to address as many as possible. We do see some themes, some general themes coming out that we will prioritize. I do want to give the commissioners an opportunity. Christopher, can I ask you, team, to give the commissioners an opportunity if there's specific issues they want to focus on right now?
No, that's wonderful. So definitely
Yes.
At this point, open at the dais.
And Natalie, thank you. This is Commissioner Douglas. I echo your appreciation for the great participation and the detailed questions. You know, we certainly want this program to be effective in getting funding out the door and meeting its goals. So, you know, we're listening, and I will just not take up time right now because I'm like you, wanting to get us through our agenda and to as many of these questions as we can. So thank you.
And this is Vice Chair Scott. I will just second what Commissioner Douglas said. These are great questions, and I appreciate the really good feedback that we're getting from folks.
And Commissioner Sharoma, is there anything specific you'd like to ask at this point in time, or would you like us to move forward to the next section of the presentation?
Go ahead and let's move forward. And I'm really appreciative of the need, the interest, the hunger to get this program rolled out. And I'm very appreciative that the Energy Commission team is looking at how to do that to provide for equity and fairness in the rollout. Thank you.
Great, Christopher.
At that point, I'll
let's move
turn it
forward.
back over to Ryan.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chris. And thank you so much for all of your questions so far. We will have additional discussion breaks as well as the public comment period at the end of the presentation. So we will get to the rest of your questions throughout the presentation. So now we're moving on to topic number 3, which is eligible projects and costs. So Survivor for project funding will cover the following actions listed here. HVAC assessment, general maintenance, adjustment of ventilation rates, filter replacement, carbon dioxide monitor installation, and completion of an HVAC assessment report. Applicants can also receive contingency funds for repairs, upgrades, or replacements for up to 20% of the requested amount. Please note that the initial grant awards will not include additional funding for repairs, upgrades, or replacements above the 20% contingency threshold. Additionally, Survivor has a requirement that all repair, upgrade, or replacement work must be performed by a skilled and trained workforce as defined by the Public Contract Code, and those requirements are listed on this slide. I would also like to apologize for any background noise you may hear. There is some construction going on in my building, so I apologize for that in advance. Next slide, please. The Survivor program will also offer reimbursement payments for assessment and maintenance projects for which work was contracted and performed after August 1st, 2020. In order to qualify for reimbursement funding, applicants must provide documentation certifying that the work was contracted and performed after August 1st, 2020. Please note that if project work was first contracted before August 1st, the project is not eligible for reimbursement funding. Additionally, the project must meet the requirements for assessment and maintenance projects outlined in the Survivor guidelines. Moving on to topic number 4, application process. Survivor has two main types of applications: assessment and maintenance projects, and applications for reimbursement of work already performed. Both application types will be part of the same 6-step process and treated with the same level of priority. The initial award will set aside funding, and all awards will follow the same process for requesting reimbursement. I'm sorry, my cat. Very sorry. Sorry about that. The initial award will set aside funding, and all awards will follow the same process for requesting reimbursement. All awardees must complete all reporting requirements to receive funds. And the 7 steps for the Survivor application process are outlined here. Next slide, please. To apply for an HVAC assessment and maintenance grant, an LEA must provide an assessment and maintenance grant application form with completed information on all schools included in the application, along with a verified site-specific contractor estimate. When applying, LEAs will submit their application package via an electronic document system that will be specified before the first notice of funding availability is issued. Applications will be identified by the date and time they were submitted. Please be aware, all application materials will be considered public records unless an exemption under the Public Records Act applies. At the beginning of each round, staff will issue a notice of funding availability. Applications will be reviewed in the order they were received by the CEC. Staff will determine whether the application is complete and will work with applicants to make corrections as needed. Please note that incomplete applications will be rejected, but applicants can reapply during the open application period. Once an application is approved, the project will be placed in a queue depending on utility area and funding tier. LEA grant applications must include contractor estimates for reasonable site-specific costs, verified by a licensed professional. The budget for each Survivor award will equal the sum of all individual site budgets included in the LEA grant application. Each site budget will equal the contractor estimate for work to be completed at that site, plus a 20% contingency fee for repairs and upgrades. Please note that budgets are site-specific, and 20% contingency funds may only be spent at the site for which those funds were originally assigned. LEAs are permitted to seek funding for projects from other programs, but applicants may not seek seized funds to cover the same costs covered by other funding sources. When a grant application is approved, the CEC will notify the grantee of the awarded amount and provide information regarding additional reporting and verification requirements. After being notified, grantees will confirm the award and provide a payee data record along with a final budget page identifying grant awards by site. Awardees are eligible to receive no more than 50% of the total grant amount upfront for ongoing projects. The remaining 50% of awarded funds will be distributed when the project has been completed. Each Survivor eligible project will have up to 18 months maximum to complete all repair, upgrade, or replacement work. Additionally, grant recipients will have an additional 3 months to complete final verification and energy efficiency reports. Grant recipients will be responsible for monitoring and meeting all required reporting and invoicing deadlines.
Okay, this brings us to our second discussion break. So thank you very much, Ryan. Staff is interested in feedback regarding the estimated cost and typical length of time for one of these HVAC assessment and maintenance projects. Additionally, staff has posted some questions related to the proposed application process. Basically, can these Survivor projects be started and completed within the next 12 to 18 months? How much time would an LEA need to develop an application based on the information needed? We're also provide a reminder that you can use the raise hand feature, *9, and there will be a public comment period for the end for all general questions. But we're trying to focus the questions on this breakout session on what Ryan just proposed. So at that point, I will look for raised hands.
All right, so just want to let everyone in the chat know we are already breaking 100 questions. We will be recording all of these questions and answering them as soon as possible, most likely after the workshop, and we will attempt to post those for you guys. Let's allow our first attendee. We have 12 raised hands right now, and Just a reminder, please try to keep all comments under 3 minutes. Rick Brown, you will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Given that this program's focus is on improving classroom air quality and the significant research showing the impact of methane gas, gas-fired HVAC on poor air quality, will you be prioritizing the replacement of gas-fired HVAC units with fully electrified units?
In this first round that these guidelines are addressing, we're looking at just the assessment and maintenance. In further additions, we'll start doing an analysis of retrofit projects. So at this point, we're not really looking into that, but that's something that we'll take in the comments for discussion as we get to that stage.
All right, so one of the questions we have that's coming in, multiple of them, would be, is it a requirement that the work performed must be a contractor, or can this work be completed by qualified trade expert district employees?
Yes, the statute is clear on the qualifications necessary. So if those staff are not contractors, but they meet all of the qualified, the qualifications in the statute, that they do have those qualifications met, I don't think there's any requirement that they have to be a contractor. It's just that they have to be trained and qualified personnel.
May I take an opportunity on this topic to express that written comments regarding the course requirements and the practical implications as to how a district will be able to meet those requirements are of specific interest to the program. So we would like to better understand where you see any conflicts and any proposals for overcoming those that are consistent with the law.
Thank you, Natalie.
All right, another question in the Q&A, is the requirement for a contractor estimate or will an estimate from a professional architect / engineer be accepted?
That's a good question. We'll take that under advisement and get an answer for you on that.
All right, we're up to 14 raised hands. I'm going to take another one of those. Douglas, you will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. My question was about the funding. Is that, if I heard it correctly, is that spread over 3 years? And if I understand, it's for stimulus for reopening the schools. If it's spread over 3 years, then why 3 years and not all at once? I would think that 3 years, 2.5 years from now, the schools should be well reopened.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's just the way that the statute was written and the way that the funds were set up to be transferred from the programs.
Yeah, let me make that 3-year distinction clear. The funding for the program accumulates over a 3-year period from the large electrical and gas corporations. So the CEC is not provided the money in bulk at one time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and just want to let everyone in the chat know more technical questions are more suited for the Q&A, as we will be able to answer those in depth later on after the workshop, and try to reserve the comments and the raised hands to more of the discussion break or more quick answers that we'd be able to give so that we can get through as many people as possible. Let's see. Another one of the questions we have in the Q&A that I'm seeing a lot on the application side, if an application are reviewed in order to receive, will CEC closed application submittals if oversubscribed in a tier?
Yeah, that's something we're looking at the process of how that's going to work to best sort of manage our workflow and not have applicants have to reapply if they've already applied and after their application we've run out of available funds. But we're working on the details of that because you could imagine it's complicated where it's not just one bucket. There are multiple queues for each utility since the money needs to be spent in that utilities area. So and when an application gets in, we'll have to look at how much money is available in that tier and in that utilities service territory.
Thank you. And Alice Sung, we will now unmute you. You're allowed to speak.
Thank you. I had a number of questions left over from the first break, but I'll probably reserve a few for the end. Really quickly, the first couple, the 1,000 to 10,000 tiers of LEAs, is that a site or LEA as in a district? In other words, the fourth tier more than 10,000, is that more than 10,000 students at one site or more than 10,000 in the district?
I'll let Jonathan respond to that.
Thank you for the question. The enrollment tiers are by LEA, so that would not be by site, but the overall district.
The district, got it. Second question is, you said funding is about 200 million for this year. Have you determined what the breakout is by utility, the 4 utilities? Or is that 200 million per utility district territory?
That's a great clarification. Yes, we do have that breakout that we've done internally based on some of the estimates. And I believe we're anticipating when we do put out the notice, we provide those exact dollars so that folks know the breakout by the different utilities.
Okay, and last couple of questions. How will you, what is the criteria with which you will award funding? Is it order of complete application, eligible, it meets all the criteria? Is it in order of submission in any category?
Yeah. Yes,
then, got it.
It's in
That's
order of
yes.
submission based on completion.
Got it. And then what is the criteria other than that by which you will measure merits of an application once 25% in underserved communities is met?
That's something we will discuss in future updates. These guidelines that we're discussing today are just underserved. So for this initial guidelines and the initial grants, it's just underserved. Once we start opening it up further, we'll develop that language. But just to give people an idea, it's the number of schools in our very quick estimation is well over 25% of the schools, and over 50% of the schools in California meet one of those underserved criteria. So we're talking about a fairly large pool that meet one of those underserved communities.
Right, I agreed. It would easily be, if we were to center equity, right, it would be that those actually take this small amount of funding, period. The last question I have is, what are the, and you asked about methods, what is the estimation for just the estimate to do the assessment, the filtration, a filter switch out and a CO2 monitoring, insertion of CO2 monitors? Or are they actually also supposed to estimate, cost estimate, give a cost estimate for a, assuming it's, in need of replacement, a retrofit for an HVAC system?
Yeah, the retrofit, those are a separate. We're just looking initially when we're talking about the contractor estimates, for the this initial phase of grants is for the basic assessment report, maintenance, CO2 monitoring, ventilation, and filtration. It's for those initial work. That's the estimate that we're looking for.
All right, thank you, Alice, for those wonderful questions. We'll be moving on to the next raised hand. Peter Bowden, you will be allowed to speak. Peter, do you have a question? Otherwise, I will move to the next raised hand. All right. Next question will be from Craig Bender. You will be allowed to speak. Craig Bender, do you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. It took me 2 clicks to unmute. I'm
No
sorry.
problem.
This is Craig Bender with Ventacity Systems. The process seems to assume that there's an existing HVAC system in the school, but I've been in many schools where there's only a heating system. There's no air conditioning. And with schools opening earlier in the summer, there's a need for air conditioning. And B, the only ventilation is, quote, operable windows, which are generally not open for various local reasons. And even if they were open, they would not provide sufficient ventilation because there's no cross flow. You just have open windows on one side of the classroom and a closed door on the other side. So I'm wondering if there's anything being considered to address those schools with only heating systems installed.
No, thank you, Mr. Bender. That's a good question. We will need to discuss that internally to see if that is within or without the scope of this program. But in either case, it would be in a later phase if we are talking about the installation of a new system rather than maintenance and assessment of an existing system.
Mr. Bender, I might add, if you have the opportunity in your written comments to provide us a sense of what you have encountered, the regions of the state in which you see these, those kinds of circumstances at school sites, and any proposal you would have for how we might be able to identify, at minimum, identify that need in this early phase, but consistent with the statutory requirements, we'd be very interested in considering that.
All right. So, Christopher, do you think we should move on to the next topic? And just to let the chat and Q&A know, we will have an open discussion at the very end of this forum. So please keep those questions coming in and keep raising your hands.
Okay, so are there any sort of general questions from the, I know we have 134 questions in there. Are there any that we can discuss that are directly related to this, just to get the discussion going?
Well, let me raise, this is Natalie Lee. Let me raise 2 general points that might answer or supplement the information we're providing. And that is, I do want to make sure that all participants are fully aware and following the CPUC's proceeding on implementation of 841. Some of the budget questions and distribution of funding questions that are being posed may be able to be answered by reviewing the materials there. So I do want to make sure that that you're all aware of that information. At the end of the day, we'll make sure to provide you access information with our project partners from CPUC on the call here. And the other questions that I'm just generally seeing is there is a repeated reference to the Title V requirements that are referenced in the legislation. So if I think it's an appropriate time, Christopher or Jonathan, if you could address the prioritization of projects now before we ask the commissioners if there are any other areas they'd like to focus on.
And Natalie, thank you. That's a good point. In this this initial rollout, the initial grant funds are going to be limited to the underserved communities. And, as we expand, get more information on how the project's rolling out, we'll continue to assess it for expansion into those Title V areas. But in this initial rollout, we're not looking at the Title V schools to schools within either 500 feet of major roadway or 1,000 feet of Title V.
One more quick
will be-
clarification, Christopher. Could you speak to community college eligibility specifically? I see that repeated a number of times here.
That's something that,
And that might be a Jonathan question.
yeah, that might be a Jonathan.
Understanding, we may have to return to the slide that defines eligible LEAs, but I believe the definition in the LEA eligibility precludes community colleges. But
That is my understanding as well.
Yeah, I think that's my understanding as well. We do have that as a slide. It's also, the definition is included in the draft guidelines as well.
So again, we will, as time allows, address all questions either today or in writing following today's session specific to these topic areas. We've posed these questions because they are areas we feel like you as our stakeholders provide some guidance in your written comments. Are there any areas specifically, commissioners, that you'd like us to focus on before we move on?
Not from me, Natalie. Thank you.
Not for me either.
Same. I think continue with your agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, commissioners. And as Natalie was saying, it's like when you're putting your comments in, comments and thoughts on some of these questions as far as helping us with methods to verify contractor estimates that are not burdensome, and also cost benefit of different CO2 systems that give the value but don't have extraordinary costs. So with that, I will turn it back to Ryan. Thank you very much.
All right, great. Thank you, Chris. And thanks everyone again for that round of questions. And just reminding you again that we will have another discussion break as well as a final comment period at the very end. So this brings us to the final topic of today's presentation, which is reporting requirements. An HVAC assessment report is required for the assessment and maintenance grant and will be funded as part of the award. A qualified testing personnel or qualified adjusting personnel shall prepare the HVAC assessment report, which should include HVAC equipment information, ventilation rates, and verified exhaust, a list of system deficiencies along with recommendations for necessary repairs or replacements, and cost-effective energy upgrades. A licensed professional will then review the report and determine what repairs would be necessary to meet minimum ventilation and filtration requirements, along with the recommendation for any energy efficiency upgrades and a site-specific cost estimate. Upon completion of the project, the awardee must prepare an HVAC verification report for each school included in the grant as well. The verification report must include a description of all project work activities and outcomes, verified ventilation and exhaust rates, proof of carbon dioxide monitor installation, a list of system deficiencies and recommendations for additional changes, and verification that all work was performed by a skilled and trained workforce. All energy savings and greenhouse gas emission reductions that occur as a result of a SEES-funded project will be attributed to the utility that provided the funds. After project completion, awardees will be required to report energy savings to the CEC. The benchmark used for reporting energy savings will be the energy demand and emissions that would have occurred if school reopening ventilation requirements were met without the assessment, adjustment, maintenance, repairs, and efficiency upgrades funded by SEES. LEAs will be required to report school energy usage before and after Survivor improvements were implemented. LEAs will have 3 months after project completion to submit energy savings reports. And this brings us to our final discussion break. For anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to any of the topics we have just presented for topic 5, or any corresponding part of staff's proposal in the draft guidelines, this time we're speaking feedback regarding energy efficiency savings tracking and reporting, plus benchmark and baseline calculation methodology.
All right, and just want to let everyone know in the raised hands again, if you have a question and it's technical, please put it in the Q&A box, and to try and keep all comments to 3 minutes if possible. Ted, Tiffany, you will be allowed to unmute.
Yeah, hi, Ted Tiffany with Goodman and Blaubutt Consulting Engineers. 2 points that come up, and I would need to repeat them, is that increasing ventilation and perhaps adding air conditioning in those LEA districts that don't have air conditioning are going to increase energy use with the benefit of providing indoor air quality. So there won't be an energy savings in a lot of these districts, and the district shouldn't be penalized for that. Secondly, any trigger of even adding a CO2 sensor is going to trigger Title 24, Part 6, and DSA review. So that 12 to 18 month period may be impacted for that. And I would consider any kind of extension for that DSA process review, because that adds significant time in these projects. But again, going back to one of the earlier comments, all those low-income districts that are next to the highways that are impacted through Oakland, Alameda, even Berkeley and San Francisco, all of those districts are heating only districts and are going to be challenged with Williams Act complaints about overheating classrooms if continuous ventilation is introduced. So a lot of those are going to have to add air conditioning or perhaps add dedicated ventilation systems that will trigger DSA review. So please consider that in your further development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tiffany.
We have a comment in the Q&A. Will savings be tracked and reported at the measure level, or will they be tracked at the facility level?
That has not been determined at this point. We are looking at recommendations, suggestions, comments on that at this point to help us develop our thinking in coordination with the IOUs and the CPUC. But one thing just to remember, that the way the statute's written, it's not the energy savings before and after on the existing systems. It's a calculation of how much energy would have been spent by the existing system to get to the benefits, the ventilation and filtration benefits for this program. So that's a little bit more of a complicated before and after to track what the energy savings is. To get to Mr. Tiffany's point on, you might be using more energy than now to get to those benefits, but we're not going from now to that. It's what would have happened, or what your system would use in energy to get to the better filtration and ventilation.
And another good comment I'm seeing on energy savings, contractors are not trained to report energy savings nor perform calculations. Consider allowing the LEA to obtain an energy project consultant for the program.
Okay, and this is something we're not looking at putting the burden on the LEAs of calculating that energy savings, but we are asking them to provide us the data necessary for the staff that will do that calculation. So no, we're not looking at this point. We haven't discussed the LEAs being responsible for that energy savings calculation, but there will be data points on that these professionals are trained to gather, that they already gather for other programs that we will be asking for in the forms and in the final HVAC assessments and verifications.
Thank you, Chris. And just for the Q&A, just letting you guys know, for questions regarding the contractors and consultant costs and your guys' estimates, please refer that to the Q&A or put that in our written comments in our docket. We're going to move to one of the phone questions we have. We got 9 attendees raising their hand. Brian, you will be allowed to speak.
Yes, my company manufactures a standalone ventilation system that's HEPA-based and very low energy. No need for a contractor. Will we be exempt from a program like this just because we don't have the contractor necessary to install?
That's something we would take a look at if you put some written comments together, and that would be, as I say, not under this initial award, which is just for the assessment maintenance of existing systems. But thank you.
All right, and we will allow David Patterson. You may now unmute yourself.
Thanks. Yeah, my question is about the application process. In a previous slide, it said applications are due by February 1st. So does that mean we need to get with the school district to get the assessment completed along with the application by February 1st?
If you get clarification, I don't, as to what slide you were referencing on, I don't believe there's a February 1st, any February 1st deadline for applications.
Yeah, I think there's just some confusion. The February 1st deadline has to do with the utilities process working with the CPUC on budget determination. The relevant dates for you to focus on here would be we will issue notice regarding solicitation of applications. The statutory requirement is April 1st, but we do not anticipate the full guidelines being adopted until some point in mid-April. So I would say, April is certainly a focus of activities. We'll begin to accept applications, but we will not have provided notice of the overall application period until our guidelines are final.
And this is one of the, in the next slide, so we'll have some slides on this.
Right.
All right, and we have a lot of questions coming in about like double dipping and other programs. One of the questions says, can these projects get funded from AB 841 work with utility incentive programs? Can they receive incentives or on-bill financing for part of the project, or would that be considered double dipping?
Okay, the way that we're thinking about this from a staff level is that if you are leveraging other programs, other ways of minimizing the cost of the work that we're trying to do under this this reopening for the schools, that's wonderful because then more schools get the benefit of the funds. The only thing that we're precluding is if you are getting grant funds for a specific portion, that cannot be paid for by something else as well. So it's basically, it's more of double billing. If you are asking for money for this grant and getting awarded money for this grant under your estimate, your contractor's estimate, any monies within that contractor's estimate have to be taken into account any of those other programs and reduced accordingly, so that what the grant amount does not include any amounts that you're actually getting funded by other sources. So that's the only thing that we're at this point proposing to preclude and make sure that all the money that comes in from this grant goes to the programs that it was intended to.
All right, let's 8 more people have raised hands. Darren Vey, you will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I work at San Diego Unified School District as the Energy Utilities Program Supervisor, and I just had a question about savings. And there's 2 things I heard. I heard that it's calculated savings, and therefore, you don't really have to figure it out and that. And that's called what's called stipulated savings. And then I heard that you need data before and after, which is more of actual savings. So there's kind of like two different models that I'm hearing. Otherwise, you wouldn't need the data. And therefore, I'm not sure which one takes priority. And number two, we have now new stipulations based on open windows and doors while HVAC is running due to air quality issues, fans that are running longer times so that we have better air quality. We've implemented these and programmed our systems to do that today. Timing of savings and when you do the before and after is critical here, because someday, we may change that based on COVID situations. And so I can see that the before and after picture can change based on the operational requirements of how we're having to deal with COVID-19 and if it ever goes away. So if you could address which savings method are we using and what rules will be taken into account when we factor those into the savings calculation.
No, thank you, Darren. Those are really good questions. And yes, it's yes and yes. Not to be too confusing is, you're right that the statute is very clear that the energy savings are calculated. They're not measured. But when we're talking about collecting measurements of sort of current, that is basically to take that information and so that the analyst doing those calculations have the information necessary to basically do, the sort of the fact checking of if they're correct or not. So having that that recorded sort of, before and after is just some of the data points in order to make those calculations or to check if those calculations look like they're accurate, if they make sense. So, and your second point is very good, and we'll need to discuss that more. And so there's some really good points on what if a school has gone ahead and taken steps due to COVID, due to other things proactively, and how does that affect those calculations? It's really going to be a discussion we'll have as going forward is on those calculations. It's really the system getting to those ventilation. If you've already made it to those ventilation, what is the delta? So that's a good question. We'll have to have additional discussions with PUC IOUs and the stakeholders on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and Chris, we are at we have 7 more raised hands. We can keep going through these right now in this discussion break, or we can start moving into our open forum. And just to let everyone in the chat know, any comments regarding DSA and project timelines, please submit that to the written comments in the docket so that we can answer those questions right away and have them logged.
Excellent. No, if we'll just try to take as many as we can.
All right, sounds good. Lou Jacobson, you will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Good morning. As this is ratepayer funded through the California Public Utilities Commission, enrolling into that very specific proceeding, it will be tracked, from my understanding from the recent decision, separately to the IOU portfolios, and is inherently cost effective by the legislation. Why not use the DEER, or the Database for Energy Efficiency Resource Deemed measures for HVAC and like measures to minimize impact and maximize the effectiveness of integrating with the CEDARS platform. So I wanted to make that recommendation on the EE savings side being tracked and reported. And then on the benchmarks and baselines, I do want to make the recommendation that we do not adopt the dual baseline methodology that the PUC uses as associated with investor-owned utility programs or the CCA programs. And we use existing as baseline based on climate zone. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Jacobson.
All right, and next person is Brendan Havener. Oh, he just unlowered his hand. No problem. Oh, I see you re-raised your hand. I will allow you to unmute yourself, Brendan.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So, straightforward question: would portable air filters, purifiers, be eligible measures, and is that a known? Is that known at this point in time? Thank you.
Okay, that's something that we will discuss. That's a good question, but I don't have an answer for you right now.
Thanks.
All right, and Andy Perez, you may unmute yourself.
Yeah, how you doing? Andy Perez with the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. A quick question on the energy calcs for portables that are owned by County Office of Education's located on other LEA district sites. We don't have access to the meters of those sites because we have standalone portables. How do we measure those calcs or get the data?
That's a really good question. That's something that we have spoken to a little bit with the PUC on, how to deal with portables versus other building types. So that's something if you could put in your written comments, that'd be great. And we'll also take note of it here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Alice Sung, you are unmuted. Oh, you are able to unmute yourself. Sorry, there you go.
Thank you. I just would like some clarification on what criteria is being used for meeting the goals for ventilation and filtration. And then as a part of that specifically, it seems as though the current guidelines allow for a less than a MERV 13 filter if the current system is, can only take, say, a MERV 8 or less. Why is that being allowed as opposed to the intent is to replace the system such that it would allow a better filtration?
Okay, let me take the filter question first. That's going to be something that we're going to have to look at as they come in. As you may know, system impact from different filters is mainly a factor of pressure drops.
Mm-hmm.
So a better designed filter, you can put a MERV 13 filter in a system and not have any pressure drop. If there's basically, if you imagine there's more pleats, there's more surface area you're pulling the air through. So it's the way that the statute was written. They gave that option. We're going to have to really look at what our process is for asking the questions of the contractors. If they come to us and say that they cannot provide a MERV 13, we're going to need to really delve into why they can't do it, if it's not using the right filter or if there is a problem. But because of the number of schools and trying to use the funds wisely, if they can get a MERV 13 into an existing system and not have the expense of replacing an entire system just to try to get a better filter in,
Mm-hmm.
that would be preferable. But that's something that in this initial phase, we're just focusing on those, getting better filtration in there if possible, and then and later deal with retrofits. But there's a lot of information out there from the Energy Commission and ARB on how to deal with that filtration issue.
Yes. Okay. Can you address ventilation? Is the attempt of measurement of success to meet some standard of ventilation, say an ASHRAE 55 or?
Oh yeah, it's in the.
It is in the guidelines.
The building standards. I think they reference it in one of the slides. The table 120. I don't remember the exact name of it, but it is a table that we're going to put into the appendix of these guidelines. I don't know if it's been copied there yet, but that will be in the version that goes out.
Okay,
I believe
thank-
in the guideline, there's a link to that table as well in the building standards, in the California Building Energy Efficiency Standards.
Thank you.
All right, we're getting to the end of our raised hands, and I just wanted to let any of the commissioners, if you had any discussion questions or something you wanted to bring up, feel free to speak up now.
I'm still good.
Also, this is Genevieve. I'm so good. Very interesting presentations and the questions. Thank you.
And no questions from me. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, commissioners. As Houston has said before, we'll be spending some time to give some thought to and make sure that we are giving answers to the questions that were put into the chat. So we want to make sure we give those as much attention as you guys did and write in them. And so you have those answers. So we will take some time and give some thoughtful answers on those. At this point, I just want to address next steps. So if we can go to that slide. Okay. As some of the questions as far as what the timelines we're looking at this point and going forward, following this workshop and the information that's been put out on our website as far as the draft guidelines, we're asking for the written comments to be submitted to us by February 5th. And then staff will start really looking through those and looking through the notes from today's comments as well. The February, March, that's, as Natalie talked about, that's finalizing the budgets through the process between the IOUs and the CPUC on the advice letter process, the receipt and approval, and then getting the funds to the program, which will happen on a quarterly basis. In March, we will basically take those comments we received you for in February. We'll take the version that's that you guys have seen, make necessary revisions to that and improvements. We'll post that in March for a sort of a second draft, and we'll get the final draft guidelines posted on April 1st, and that'll allow people to see what the expectations are so that we can start getting soliciting for grant applications on April 1st. And then in April, we will go to a Energy Commission business meeting to get those draft guidelines adopted. And then following that, we will begin approving the grant applications in May through June. So with that, I will turn it back over to Ryan.
All right, thanks, Chris. So that concludes the Survivor presentation for today. And that brings us to our final public comment period. As we've previously mentioned, you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom. You can also type your question in the Q&A window. And if you're calling in via phone, you can use *9 to raise hand and *6 to mute or unmute your phone line. And please limit yourself to 3 minutes per comment.
Ryan, because a number of folks are dropping off and a couple of our questions are asking about written comments, could you, sorry to jump your presentation, but could you just the slide showing how to submit written comments?
Sure, yeah. So we are also accepting written comments until February 5th. And you can submit comments directly to the C's docket, which is docket 20 renew-01 through the e-commenting system at the link provided here, which is also available on the Energy Commission's website, specifically the webpage for the C's program.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Natalie. We have 10 questions, and we're still have a lot of questions coming in the Q&A. One of the questions I'm seeing a lot of is about the application and seeing a draft of the application. Christopher, at what point in time would they be able to see that, or perhaps after the second draft of the guidelines?
Yes, we are working now to finalize the application forms. And as I said before, we're trying to keep them very user-friendly, very simple. The concept is for those forms that an LEA would have one sort of application form, and then a place below it to add the site-specific information for each school. So if they're doing multiple schools, one application form and then places for the site-specific. But we are working to finalize those forms, and we'll have them out in the next round. If we can get them out before that round, we will definitely try. But that's where we're working on right now, is just getting those forms in there. And as I say, making them as simple as possible, understanding that some of the smaller LEAs don't have a large staff to fill out very complex forms.
Thank you, Christopher. And we also have some questions regarding outreach. So what is the CEC stakeholder outreach to LEAs with school sites and underserved communities to advise them on this upcoming opportunity now and in the coming months?
Yeah, we are working actively with our public advisor's office on making sure that we have an active outreach. And we've also reached out to several stakeholders, DACAG and others, to get the word out. But we definitely encourage people to sign up for the listserv on our website. And we'll be working to get that information out so that schools are aware of the program. So yes, there will be an active program to try to get the message out to stakeholder groups that work actively with underserved communities.
All right, and one more question, since we are coming up to people are asking about the 2 p.m. session. If we could just give a quick reminder about the 2 p.m. session we have coming up.
Yes, the 2 p.m. session will be focused on the plumbing and appliance section. So at 2 p.m. We'll go through a very similar presentation, but focused on the replacement of non-compliant plumbing features.
All right, we're going to start going into our raised hands. We have 9 raised hands right now. And David Ross, you will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Great, thank you, Ryan. My name is David Ross. I'm a mechanical engineer from Southern California. I work with many school districts on indoor air quality solutions. And one of the issues we're working through, which I'd like your input on, is how to save energy over time without increasing outside air changes and putting additional pressure on the rooftop units. In Southern California, we have mostly cooling only and gas reheat units, which struggle to keep up with those increases in outside air. One of the things we're looking at is ways to offload that filtration IAQ performance off the rooftop unit. And a great solution we found is in commercial grade HEPA air scrubbers. I'd like to see if you guys have any specific language recommending that type of equipment, or what we can do to essentially get that in the spec. What we found is it reduces lead times for these type of projects significantly and reduces cost over time when considering additional compressor energy and installation costs for more involved systems.
So yeah, no, we have not developed a language on those sort of add-on systems, but it would be really beneficial to get some information in the comments on how you've envisioned those systems being incorporated into the program.
Gladly, thank you.
All right, and our next raised hand is Patricia Terry. You will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Patricia Terry with the Redwood Coast Energy Authority. We work with many schools in Humboldt County. One thing I wanted to comment on was just agreeing with Craig Bender and some of the other comments you heard about the heating only areas. So in Humboldt County, we're mostly climate zone 1, and we don't have air conditioning. And often don't have ventilation beyond those operable windows. So a lot of our schools would require major retrofits to bring in any kind of ventilation to meet the requirements for reopening. And so I had a question about the funding and how it would work in this first round, because we would like to apply and be able to address some of these schools. If a school had some systems that did have ventilation, for example, in their portables, those units do have outside air and could be adjusted and have maintenance work done. So there would be a budget for that and the assessment budget. If there were the 20% contingency funds were added on top of that, could those 20% contingency funds then be used for other heating systems to retrofit them and possibly add ventilation? Or does it have to be used on the system that's applied for, even if it's on the same in the same site?
The way staff is reading the statute as being fairly prescriptive that the 20% is to make those, basically it says make that system more functional and energy efficient. So it seems to be focused on, the system that is being, maintained. But we'll take a look at that and discuss more. But it looks like it's fairly prescriptive in the statute at this point.
All right, and just wanted to let everyone know who's raising their hands, and everyone in the comment section. We are going to answer all written comments as best to our ability, and they will be posted after the workshop, hopefully in some form of Q&A fact sheet in some way. So if you have any questions or technical, or you can post them in our Q&A, and you don't need to come into the call to repeat them. We will have them written out and saved, and we will answer them as to the best of our ability. We have Michelle Healy or Michael Healy. You'll be allowed to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. It is Michelle Healy. I'm from Santa Clara Unified School District, and we are in half of our districts in PG&E and the other half is in Silicon Valley Power. And we do get our gas through PG&E, so I'm also going to put in a plug for allowing just the utility of gas allowing us to submit for schools, because of course our low-income schools are the schools that are in the IOU instead of the public. So we would like to apply for those. And one of my questions is if the student count is the entire LEA, or is it just the number of students within the approved, like PG&E territory? Or is it the entire LEA, even if our district is split between two utility companies?
I think from Jonathan's earlier answer, for the tiers, it's the entire LEA. We don't,
okay.
It's not split by qualifying for disadvantaged.
Okay.
Or underserved.
Well, I was thinking more of just between the two different utilities. So half of our district is in PG&E and the other half is in Silicon Valley Power, which may not get funded.
Right. I know we're looking at the size of the LEA, I believe, Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't been looking at splitting the LEA to the qualifying in the utility portion of the LEA. Jonathan, do you have any clarification on that?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Christopher. I mean, we appreciate that, district lines don't match up with utility district boundaries or service territories. So we're trying to find some somewhat easy way to make these distinctions. And we were not proposing to separate an LEA into their proportional area in a service territory. I think that would just be too far in terms of a complication of how we would, allocate the funds and place LEAs into those tiers.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and our next commenter will be Hank Kiefert. You will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Thank you. My name is Hank Kiefert. I'm with Sizer Cove Engineering. I had a couple of questions. It's on the funding. If the funding is going to be released over 3 years for different programs, is there an opportunity to apply for one application and phase the work in for the district as the money comes available? And then to add on to that, if a district has funding available for themselves, can they have the work done and then we can apply for reimbursement?
Could you repeat your first part just to make sure I understand the nuance there?
Sure. We're talking about only releasing funds for certain parts of the AB 841 right now. So I'm wondering, can we send in one submission for the entire scope of that district? Or are you asking us to resubmit, which is going to cost the district additional monies for someone to do this several times when it could have been done in one application?
Okay. The way that we're reading this is that the first portion of this grant, the assessment, verification report, sorry, the HVAC assessment report, verification report, that work that the grant's paying for is going to lead into those recommendations for the second part. But if you sort of basically, you're saying you've done all of that assessment and you already know the second part, or I guess that's, but that aside, this first one is just for that smaller part. For those, that larger replacement new systems, that would be a separate, an application for a separate portion of the program. So we'll take that comment and we'll take a look at how we're envisioning this to see if there's a way to not create an unnecessary burden on the schools. But we do see that this is a sort of an assessment and maintenance grant that we're looking at this point, and then there would be a separate application for when you've done and you have those verification reports and the recommendations by the professionals to do that additional work. That would be a separate sort of upgrade and maintenance and upgrade grant under a different application.
Then the second part about the reimbursement?
Yes. And once again, just focused on the assessment and maintenance, this first portion, reimbursements are part of that, this initial grant program. So if you come to us and say, we've already done assessment and maintenance work that's within the scope of these initial grants, yes, you can come to us and get reimbursement for it. But once again, this initial phase is just that. It's not reimbursement for work that was done that's out of the scope of this initial grant program.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and just a reminder to all attendees that we will be answering all of these Q&A questions as soon as possible. The slides will be posted shortly after the webinar. And we will have all this information posted on the AB 841 webpage. And Aaron Jobson, you will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. My question is about what requirements there might be for districts selecting the contractor to provide the estimate and do this work. And is that selection kind of subject to public contract code, public bidding requirements? And are there any requirements specific to this program for that selection process, as there was for Prop 39? And because that will be a key component in sort of the process of getting this work done and how long that will take for school districts to navigate through.
Aaron, this is Natalie. I
Natalie.
wanted to take the opportunity to just make a request based on that. This is definitely an area that we have been working on. And if in your written comments, you could provide any suggestions or point to any other state-funded, state-sponsored programs that were able to provide some alleviation of that requirement, it would help us to identify where we have any opportunities. we are exploring it. We do recognize some of the challenges created in Prop 39, that your assistance would be helpful.
Okay, I'll look into that and see if we can provide more substantive written comment about that through the portal.
Thank you.
All right, and to our next attendee, we have Lou Jacobson. You will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Thank you. So Lou Jacobson with Eureka City Schools in Humboldt. And I wanted to go back to one of your very first questions, which was specifically about how the approach of prioritizing schools in hard to reach or disadvantaged communities may impact larger districts actually submitting. And we're a small district, but large for Humboldt County. And the challenge, and I suspect this scales to other districts, is that we would then, so let's say we had 2 schools that qualified in the first round, the rest of our school sites did not. If we went through that application process multiple times, we'd have increasing soft costs for the submission of those applications and the assessments and the reporting. So there's an economy of scale, particularly for, I would say, the small, medium school districts, but likely the bigger LEAs as well, where if we could do one round where we get all our sites in there and push it through, we would save thousands and thousands of taxpayer dollars. And I suspect that would hold true for others.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, and our next question is coming from Donald Gilligan. You will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for these very good presentations. I have a follow-up question about when the maps or lists of the LEAs that are going to be applicable, that can submit applications in this first round will be available. There was a comment earlier that you're working on the lists. I just wondered when we might expect to see them.
Oh, as far as the GIS tool to allow people to figure out utility areas and LEA coverage. Yes. Oh, yeah. We're actively working on that. I don't have an exact rollout date yet for that, but we're trying to get that as soon as possible.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and our next question is coming from Elena Cunningham. You'll be allowed to unmute yourself.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Alana Cunningham calling from Jack Schreier's office. I have a big picture question regarding the rounds and the prioritization of projects. So my understanding is that the first round is limited to schools which serve underserved communities. And I'm wondering what the future rounds will look like. What is the second round for projects that are within 500 feet of a major traffic corridor? I'm just wondering how that will work.
Yeah, and that's something that we are, we're open to comments and thoughts about. At this point, we haven't made any statements on sort of what the next rounds are going to look like. We'll continue to sort of assess the participation, the funding available, the success of the program in this first rollout to determine the appropriate expansion of eligibility to this additional goals of the program. But we definitely definitely would love to see comments on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and next question will be coming from Rosemary Bryan. You'll be allowed to unmute yourself.
Yes, hello. My name is Rosemary Bryan. I'm with Eichler Associates. We're a mechanical engineer and commissioning agents, been working in the K through 12 market for quite some time. We were tasked last summer by quite a few school districts with coming up with a COVID readiness plan. We used the NEMI UC Davis Energy and Efficiency Institute, their white paper, to propose to do the assessment, focusing on the phase 1, which I now understand is really a mirror of what the AB 841 technical requirements are. Is that correct?
Yeah, very close. Yeah.
Right. So we've been focusing on ventilation, filtration, operation of the systems. And we've been going through with several districts and verifying their classrooms based on that criteria. Again, we're focusing on the phase 1, not so much the CO2 monitoring at this time. And my question for you is, if we've already started doing this work just to expedite, because it is very labor intensive to do this, schools have been using other funds. And my question for you is, how might, if they've been paying for this work to be done and they're not necessarily in the or underserved communities, excuse me, what might I be able to tell them as far as when and if we might be able to put in an application for reimbursement?
Okay, two things. First, the statute is pretty clear that the work was contracted for and performed after August. I think 30th. I have to double check the exact date.
Yeah,
but
August 1st, correct.
August 1st, sorry.
And that is correct. We started doing these surveys when they knew they weren't going back into the classroom. So we've been actively going out and making sure all the systems are working properly, the correct filtration, everything to meet the requirements for the program.
Wonderful. So yeah, with that first caveat, as I said before, at this point, we're still rolling it out to the underserved community schools in underserved communities. So until we get going on that and do some evaluation of the program, I don't have a date certain for when the next revision of the guidelines to expand eligibility will happen and exactly what the scope of that, any changes to the eligibility would be. So unfortunately, I don't have a clear answer for you on that one. We have to see how
So just wait
it rolls out.
For future rollouts. I also did want to make one comment regarding energy efficiency. What we find is we go through and we try to correct the deficiencies as we go along, whether it's repairing damper linkages, things of that nature, is that we see that getting economizer cycles working properly is where you're going to find your energy efficiency. And if it's possible to adapt the current system to demand control ventilation, that's where you're going to get your energy efficiency. However, during COVID right now, all guidelines are saying to disable your demand control ventilation and to operate at the higher rate of 15 CFM per person. So I don't see those savings happening until we get through the pandemic. However, getting economizer dampers operating is going to be huge, and we feel that's a win-win where they're going to get savings right away that we've calculated.
That's wonderful. And Ms. Bryan, thank you very much for commenting, because your experience, I think, is going to be invaluable in giving guidance to people as they're trying to figure out what they should do. So any information you can put in your comments that can be shared with the other school districts that are trying to figure out what the best steps forward, I think would be very helpful. So thank you very much.
And thank you to most of our attendees. Please, we're almost down to like the last few hands, and just a quick reminder, please post all of your questions to the docket with any like technical questions you have. Keep posting the questions in the Q&A. We will go through as many as we can and try to answer as many as we can and post them on our website as soon as possible, along with the PowerPoint. Our next question is coming from Joseph Morales. You'll be allowed to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. This is Joseph Morales. I work for an HVAC distributor down in Southern California, focusing primarily on the K through 12 district market. A lot of the school districts I'm working with here are implementing through the CARES Act funding and ESSER funding, indoor air quality COVID-19 risk mitigation strategies that include implementing commercial grade HEPA air scrubber filtration devices. So I think it's a proven technology, and that, if not through this grant, or a future grant, implementation of them needs to be greatly considered.
No, thank you very much. That's something, if you could put in your comments, we'll take a look at.
Next question will be coming from Andy Perez. You'll be allowed to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Again, with the county superintendent of schools, in the application form that comes up, you had mentioned that we would put in one application form and then add the sites underneath it, which would be pretty easy to do on our own, our fully owned sites. But as we have classroom portables that need work, or how do we list those when the sites themselves are not owned by us, but just the classroom itself? Would we notate that as the school site and then the classroom number that we own at that school site?
That is a good question. We were looking at making sure that we didn't limit it to just owned facilities. We looked at leases, but it's like I have to take a look at our language, and if we'll take a look at your comment on that, on how we deal with an owned portable. I guess you're talking about portables.
Correct. Yeah, a portable on an owned, on another LEA's district that we house our portable onto. I just don't want to get mixed up whereas maybe they see this, someone sees the site and says, okay, Hernan Barstow School, it's already been requested for under that other district, and so how do we identify that other site, a single classroom at owned site?
Okay, no, we'll have to take some time to think about that, of how we deal with that. Mainly if it's, I think the biggest, it's gonna be less of a concern as far as, you're the LEA and it's, is it in an underserved community, and is it in the utilities service area are bigger for the location. But I don't see us having a huge issue with that school being outside of your sort of traditional zone, but that's something we'll have to think about a little bit and
Okay,
discuss.
thank you.
Andy, could I ask that in your written comments, you provide us some options as to how to properly reflect that in our guidelines?
Sure, I can do that.
Thanks.
All right, and for our final question that we'll be answering today will be coming from Joe Mankiewicz, I believe. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I'm with Amoresco, and we're an ESCO that works with K-12. And the question is regarding if an applicant LEA does not, for whatever reason, get the funding in like the first phase, but they choose to go find alternative financing, such as a energy savings performance contract to get the work done. Will that LEA be eligible to get reimbursed in a subsequent phase of the program, as long as they meet the requirements? And this is kind of based on this like retroactive back to August 1st clause. Is that a continuing retroactive clause?
Yeah, it's our proposal at this point, and we'll definitely would accept comments on this, is recognizing that there might be programs after our guidelines go out, after we have those that we run out of money in a funding phase in your certain area, and you have to get the work done before kids come back. You want to get the construction, whatever, done at a certain time when you have availability. Yes, if you do the work that qualifies under this program, you can come for a reimbursement. But once again, we have to make sure that if you're getting funds from somewhere else, that you're not getting grant funds here and grant funds there for the same thing that's covered. So it's just the whole issue of making sure that it's just for the delta between those two. If it's covered by some other rebate grant program, that you're not applying for grant for that was already paid for. But we definitely recognize that just because where you fall in the queue, you might not get the advanced monies to do the work before you have to get it done based on your schedule. There is the option to do a reimbursement. We're anticipating reimbursement going into the future, not just projects that were done between August 30th and the adoption of the standards, or sorry, the adoption of the guidelines.
Got it. Thank you. And
Apologies, Joe. Go ahead and keep going.
This is just a quick technical question, but the questions that were put in the Q&A for the presentation, are those going to be applied to the, or do we have to recopy them into the docket if they weren't answered here?
No, we're capturing those.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Have a great day.
We only ask you if you have, if you realize you want more nuance, more detail, more context, you can always, add that in your written comments. But yeah, no, we will.
Thanks.
Capture those. So I think we're getting sort of towards the end. And any more hands raised, Houston?
Nope, we are done with all of our raised hands. I want to thank all of our commenters, and any questions you have in the Q&A, feel free to keep writing those in. We're copying those and we will answer them to the best of our ability. And please go to our docket and answer questions in there. And just want to hand it off to Chris or to the commissioners who have any closing comments.
Yeah, at this point, I'd love to open it up to the dais for any questions they may have or any closing comments.
Well, good afternoon. I don't have any questions. The only closing comments I would make is to thank everybody so much for their really thoughtful questions and comments to us. It's a lot for us, I think, to bring back and think about, and we'll make sure to get on the ones we weren't able to answer some written answers back to you. Really appreciate, though, the thought and the care. And would also want to echo something that Commissioner Douglas said, and I think Natalie said it as well. I think as much detail as you can give us about key language or key solutions, I think that'll really help us as we try to move quickly through this. So with that, I will turn it to Commissioners Douglas and Shiroma.
Well, I will be very brief and then turn it over to Commissioner Shiroma. I want to thank everybody for your participation. I want to thank the staff for their very hard work getting us to this point. And we are very much looking forward to your comments. So please give us your comments as soon as possible, as detailed as possible. This discussion today has been extremely helpful. So, and we look forward to keeping this program moving forward and on time. So thank you. Commissioner Shiroma.
Thank you, Commissioner Douglas and Vice Chair Scott. Thank you to the Energy Commission, to your team for conducting this workshop. The comments and questions were very insightful. And I think that it's clear that your commission team is looking to demystify the application process and to provide for a means to process those applications, timely and fairly. We had a situation at the CPUC in one of our programs where, it kind of came down to applicants, practically standing, at the clicker when the whole thing opened, and how quickly could you press that button to get in the queue? And in the electronic age, there's definitely that attribute, but I know that your team is looking at how do you reach those school districts in need, and with the first swash, going to those in low income and disadvantaged areas. So thank you for a tremendous effort. And we at the CPUC, however we can be helpful, we want to be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, commissioners. And thank you, Ryan. Do we have a last slide for contacting us? Yeah. So one thing we definitely recommend is if you have any questions, reach out to us. We've had some great inputs from various stakeholders. Also, we encourage everyone very strongly to subscribe to the listserv on our website, the school EE stimulus listserv. That way you'll make sure that you get noticed of any updates to this program, comments, anything of that nature. So with that, I will ask Natalie, do you have any closing thoughts, or otherwise we will adjourn?
Thank you, Christopher, and Jonathan and commissioners for your engagement and for directing these activities. I do want to just acknowledge that it's come to our attention that there were some issues with access to the workshop today. And so the contact information here, if any of your peers, any folks that are still on the line have encountered problems in submitting questions, please contact us at this email. We'll facilitate getting your questions into our overall listing. If you should hear of any problems with access, we will be posting the recording and we'll provide some additional follow-up information to make sure all parties have this information and are able to watch the proceeding. With that, again, I just want to thank everyone for their engagement and their interest in the program, and we are committed to and excited to work with all of the stakeholders in this space. So with that, Christopher, Jonathan, I think we will leave the line open for a short while to at least make sure any last questions and answers are able to be submitted. And we'll be signing off from the commission, and unless there's anything else, Christopher?
No, I will stay on the line for a few moments just to capture any last questions or comments.
Great. Thank you all.
All right, Alice Sung, we will unmute you, allow you to talk. You can unmute yourself now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for the workshop today and all of your presentations. The question I have is, in hindsight now, I'm interested in understanding the CC's moving to use the ECA process for eligibility, as opposed to what I thought was great about the Prop 39 program was that it actually partnered with CDE to actually make allocations available. It seems as though it would be, simple enough to just identify, as you say you're doing in the mapping, identify all of the underserved districts and simply make them an allocation for the assessments.
Alice, this is Natalie. I'll just reference that this program has a different statutory basis. So the statute prescribes how we will award grants. And, we certainly appreciate that the structure in Prop 39 had some benefits, but it had a different funding basis and different statutory guidance underlying it that we don't have the discretion to.
I see. You were actually you were precluded from actually using an allocation basis. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think I'd probably put it in the positive, as the statute defines how we will award grants, and which effectively sets the structure of the program. And Prop 39's was just different.
Right.
Different statute, different, yeah.
Okay. I thought it as I understood it, and it could be I have to go back and read the language. It says, it's a minimum of 25% to underserved communities, correct?
Well, so there's multiple layers of consideration in the funding. One of the first being, of course, being ratepayer monies. that's the the proportional allocation of funding back to the utility that was the source of the funds. So that's of course a critical piece. And then the statute prescribes a couple of things regarding underserved communities. It provides a very specific definition of underserved communities applicable to these programs. It prescribes that there is a minimum, the 25% is a minimum, but it also prescribes that schools in underserved communities be offered the funding before other schools are offered the funding. So those are all straight from the statute. And where the 25% is a minimum, some of those other considerations, as Christopher had mentioned, may very likely lead to a much higher participation.
Right. I guess it depends on the, one's definition of offered, right? You put it out there as a public notice, whether they read it or not, or knew to read it, or knew they were eligible or not, and had the capacity to actually apply.
That is a fair statement. And if you have any specific comments as to the interpretation you feel is appropriate, then, we absolutely encourage you to submit those.
Right. Thank you again. Yeah, it certainly is a complexity when legislative language ties your hands, so to speak, right?
Yeah, we gotta meet the law and the intent. So
yeah, meet
so
the law, letter of the law, but also really meet the intent, which I think was all good. But thank you so much, Natalie. We'll submit comments.
You really appreciate the input. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, look, Houston, we have a couple more people with raised hands. We'll see if we can grab them.
Yep. All right. Elena Cunningham, you will be allowed to unmute yourself.
Yes, I have another kind of big picture question, and that is, if the number of applications submitted in the first round exceed the available funding, will they automatically stay at the top of the list for the second round? I mean, is there a possibility that you'll have so many underserved schools applying for this funding that only underserved schools will be funded, and the schools within the 500 feet of a major traffic corridor, and then schools who don't meet any of the priorities will not be funded?
Right. And that's a really good question. And that's the reason that we were very purposely vague on what would prompt us to change the eligibility for this round. We want to see how it goes. We want to see what the participation is. As you can imagine, if we run out of funds in a particular sort of quarter, funding quarter, we definitely, people will basically just stay in the queue, and as soon as money is available, then we'll fund them. We want to make this as easy as possible and not require a school to reapply just because we ran out of money in that funding in that round. But as we sort of go through this first couple quarters and see what the participation, see how the available funds are, we'll take a look, and we'll be soliciting comments and suggestions from stakeholders on the best way to expand the eligibility and meeting the intent of the statute.
Okay.
And I think the only thing I do want to add is, again, that is not set in stone. This is our proposal. That's exactly what we're looking for, is feedback on, considerations and concerns and alternatives, and definitely practical kind of scenarios played out to help us better understand these decisions that our leadership is making as to whether we maintain a queue of applicants from the first round, or if there's an alternative approach.
Okay, thank you.
All right, our next comment is from Hallie Bovia. You'll be allowed to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I think I'm beating a dead horse here, but I just really want to be clear. The LEA for this first round, the LEAs can apply so long as they have at least one underserved school in an underserved community, but they can only submit schools that meet the criteria, right? So if they have schools that don't, they need to wait for another round, correct?
That is our proposal at this point, is that it would be you can apply for those school sites that are serving that are in underserved communities.
And that is the only schools that are being accepted for this round.
Yeah, that's what we're proposing for this round, is just the underserved schools. So yes, as I say, if you have 10 schools, only 2 of them meet those underserved. The first round of application, we would look at just those 2.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. You have a great day.
All right, and our last question is from Greg Eiler. You'll be allowed to unmute yourself.
Perfect, thank you. We are working with both underserved and not underserved schools across California. Is it fair to say that the costs associated with determining all of the criteria necessary for AB 841 also covered under the application or the grant application that we place on their behalf?
Oh, so I'm sorry. Just to clarify, you are saying if you incur costs as their contractor to put the application in, are those covered?
No, it's quite expensive to actually do a 200, 300, 400 classroom school assessment of where they stand and what where their fresh air potential is and the upgraded necessities. And a lot of these schools don't have funds to do so. So what we would, in our conversations, and I wanted to just kind of be clear, if they do spend the funds to have this assessment done, are those assessment funds that they have spent, not us, something that they could get reimbursed during the application process?
Yeah, if it basically just depends on if the assessments they've done meet the guidelines. So, and that's one of the hard things, if they've done work in advance, if it meets sort of the guidelines that we're setting up as far as what that assessment entails, yeah, those should be reimbursable. But if they started doing assessments that go beyond the scope of AB 841, there might be portions of that work that is not eligible for reimbursement.
Okay.
And I need to add, I'm sorry, there is no guarantee of reimbursement. All of this is dependent on funding availability, their place in application, kind of the application queue. So there's no guarantee.
Okay, so we should not be advising or should not advise that any funds spent to do these assessments that we would put in an application or assist them in putting their application will be funded for sure. We just don't know at this point.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Natalie. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, that is true.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I think we are going to end our morning session.
Thanks again, all. Bye-bye.
So thank you everyone who stayed to the end of this, and I'm sure I'll see many of you in the afternoon session starting at 2 o'clock. So with that, we can end the session. Make sure we